Um, cool. Okay. So welcome everyone to our webinar today, which is Fundraising Fundamentals. I'm Robin, the co-founder of Pravi AI. At Pravi, we are building AI-powered software to help charities of any size find and convert their ideal donors. I am so happy to be joined by our presenter and fundraising expert today, Catherine Lacefield from Just Be Cause Consulting. Catherine is going to take us through a really value-packed presentation today, and we will also send out the recording to you afterwards if you want to refer back to it. So without further ado, I will hand over to you. Thank you, Catherine.
No, thank you, Robin. All right, so let's get to it because even if it's fundraising basics, there's quite a lot to cover. By the way, my camera has been doing this zooming in and out thing, and it's like very dynamic. I have yet to figure out how to turn it off. So if it moves around, I apologize in advance. All right, so let's get straight to it. So of course, this is all about really going back to what the basics are, or what I consider as the basics of fundraising. For some, maybe it's not, but let's dive right in. So the three main categories of what we're going to cover today is, of course, just going over what are the main challenges that I have found for nonprofits is from my experience, both working in nonprofits, but also with my many clients that I've had in the last couple of years. Then we're going to go straight into the sources of acquisition and prospecting. So how are we getting donors? So how are we starting to the process of building up our donor database? And then we're going to finish with stewardship, because I feel I just did four conferences in the month of May. And the thing that came up the most as one of the things that people pulled away from my speeches was this need for stewardship, that it was just not implemented in their nonprofit. So we're going to go over those three and end up with kind of the last challenge of around data. Okay, so the main challenges are, number one is most nonprofits do not have a fundraising strategy. They're kind of just like bootstrapping it. Okay, let's do a little 50-50 here. Let's do a raffle here. Let's send out an email blast. There doesn't seem to have this overall strategy that makes sense of what are we trying to do or build. There isn't an evaluation of what strategies actually work for our audience. So what I found is that most nonprofits haven't taken the time to sit, to breathe, and to establish what are the strategies that really make more sense for your situation in your particular context. Number two is this lack of internal data collection. So of course, I know we're in the world of data and all these things are very important. People don't realize what I mean by that is, do you know who your donors are? So do you know how many you have? I talked to someone who has a list of over like 1,000 donors, but couldn't tell me how many donors, like how many were giving monthly, how many were giving one time. They didn't have that information. That is something that if you are in charge of fundraising, you should always be able to know. As much as I should be able to know as a business owner how many prospects are in my list, you need to know what are you depending on as a list of potential donors. And number three is this whole challenge around the nonprofit sector overall is really lacking in data. So it's really hard to establish what are the general trends, what's going on a wider scale than just within your nonprofit, because your small data set is very useful and particular to you. But if you can understand what's happening on the wider scale, it's much more likely that you can establish certain strategies that will work to acquire new donors and maybe just depend on other people having done the research. So those are the three things that we're going to try to tackle today by finding solutions. So number one, the sources of acquisition and prospecting. So most of the time when I talk to people, they're like, we want more donors. They just are constantly on this hamster wheel of we need to acquire new donors. And yes, of course, especially if you're a small medium, you need to have a wide base of donors. So let's go straight into the different fundraising strategies or types of fundraising and the types of donors. So we talked a lot about this donor pyramid. No, it's not a pyramid scheme. Don't worry. We're just talking about how we're bringing up people. And so the pyramid is just because the base of your pyramid, the one-time gifts, is really going to be the strongest where you have the most people. So as you see with the arrows, the more you go up in the pyramid, the higher the amount of the donation. But as you go up, there's less and less people. So of course, there's less people that are going to be giving you a legacy gift than people that are giving you just a here of $20 for a raffle of some sort. So let's just quickly go over them. So the one-time gifts can take on many shapes. And in the next slide, we're going to cover what these different one-time gift strategies can look like. But then the goal is to convert your one-time donors into monthly donors. Because for a lot of nonprofits, what's lacking is this sense of stability and recurring gifts that allow them to invest in long-term strategies. Because I don't know what your organization is, but I don't know any nonprofit that doesn't need to have a budget to be able to plan what they're going to do for the year. How are you going to be able to establish your program if you don't have a sense of stability? I often tell people it's kind of like your salary. If you didn't know how much money was coming in every 2 weeks, you wouldn't be able to decide what kind of a house you could afford, or what rent you could afford, or what groceries you need to get, or where you can send your child to school. So it's the same thing for nonprofits. So the goal is to convert as many as people as possible towards a recurring gift, which gives you much more stability. Little parentheses is that monthly givers historically, and because based on several reports, are known to give up to 50% more annually because it's monthly. It's easier to stabilize for their budget, they can plan it, and it doesn't create a huge gap in their budget. So a $20 a month is a lot easier to manage than a $250 donation at the end of the year. So most people would not necessarily give that 250, they might give 100 at your annual campaign. If you spread it over 12 months, they'll give more. And this is not just, oh, that's logical. This is based on studies that have been made that monthly donors give more. So that's why they're a bit higher in the pyramid. The next one I put is grants, because grants can be a great source of acquisition, but if you're just starting, it might be a bit intense. They can be very interesting amounts, but you have to understand that they do take a lot of time to sign up for, or to apply to. And there is some relationship building with the grantors that you need to establish before you can count on a successful grant. It's a bit more complicated to get grants. And of course, you're going to get less grants than you are going to get individual donors. But depending on where you are in your development, you might not be ready yet for grants, because usually grants will look for established programs, or that you can have an evaluation strategy in place. So while I am an expert in granting, I don't necessarily recommend grants for every nonprofit, but it is something to build up to. Also, most grantors will like to show that they have other people supporting the cause. So if you can say, well, we have a strong database of 500 monthly donors that are allowing us this stability, and we have a budget that's already going to be covered, and we're just looking for you to supplement, that is a much stronger argument than like, yeah, we have no one. We have my grandmother who gives us $100 a year. Would you like to give us 50,000? Maybe not. But if you can prove that you have some stability and you have people already believing in you, it gives you that strength to apply for larger donations. Then, of course, we go into the major gifts, which are more from individuals, but they can also be from businesses. When I say major gifts, how much does that mean? It really depends on your nonprofit. I've had organizations that for them, a major gift is $1,000. I've had others that it's like, no, under 50K, that's not a major gift. Well, I wish I was you. So it really depends on where your nonprofit is in their journey, but also based on your data set of who your donors are, you'll be able to establish what is considered a major gift. It's usually the top 5 to 10%. That whole Pareto principle of the top 20% is going to give 80% of your donations still works. So you have to understand that the top 10, 20% is really the people that are going to be the ones funding your organization the most. But if you're getting 100K, then you might have smaller major donors that are giving you only a couple thousand that are still very valuable to you. But if you have a multi-million, of course, that's a bit different. And then finally, the epitome of donations is usually legacy giving. Why? Because you can't really do much more than that. It's kind of the end of the line for most people. So of course, legacy gifts, some nonprofits are really dependent on those. The difficulty is it's really hard to plan when that's going to happen and when you're going to receive that gift. So one thing that I know that is trending is that some people are making legacy gifts while they're still living. So there are ways to mobilize capital in the same way of a legacy gift by placing it, for example, in an endowment, so that the nonprofit can right now still benefit from the returns of that capital investment or of that fund, but the money still technically remains under the control of the donor until they pass away. Anyways, these are all legal accounting terms that I'm not going to get into today, but it's just to understand that there are many different models that you can use in legacy giving. But the pyramid is something, you don't come into a pyramid from the top. right? The door is usually at the bottom, unless it's a secret door that the pyramids have hidden somewhere else. Some people might come in, of course, as a grant. Maybe there's a little elevator on the side here where there's like grants that can come in. But most of the time, you're building up relationships with your donors to go from one-time gifts to monthly. Obviously, they're not going to be giving grants, but you get the point of we're going to be moving up in the pyramid. And how do we do that? Through stewardship, which we're going to talk about next. So this is just an overview of what are the different types and how you should be thinking about your fundraising strategy. So regarding one-time gifts, these are I would say the most popular types of one-time gifts. So face-to-face is those amazingly annoying people in the streets that go like, hi, you have 2 minutes for Greenpeace. I did that for 5 years, so I'm allowed calling them annoying because I know we were. But we were also amazing. I loved doing it. It was an amazing fundraising academy. It taught me so much. So there's the face-to-face, which is the most personal approach. It doesn't have to be just street fundraising. It could also be at events, or if you're, having anything that you have an opportunity to talk to your donors face to face. The second one is the phone fundraising. Phone fundraising, obviously, for the younger generation, people are traumatized of when people call them. So, you'd have to be careful about who your donor personas are. But phone fundraising is still a great way of connecting with your donors, especially existing ones or people that you already have a relationship with. I'm not saying randomly take a list from the phone book, if those even exist anymore, and call people. No. But if, let's say, you have a petition and people give their phone number willingly and you have their consent to call them, then you can do follow-ups by phone. I just wrote, I meant to write peer-to-peer, not just, it's phone fundraising on one line. I apologize. Fundraising is not just a strategy. I just realized that. Anyways, peer-to-peer is a really good strategy because you're mobilizing your network of ambassadors, of people, of volunteers, board members, your friends and family to solicit their own networks to bring money to your nonprofit. The advantage of that is that you're widening your network and allowing for new donors. That's where the acquisition can come in to come in. Because as you may know, fundraising is really all about relationships and who you know and what the contact is with the nonprofit. If a random nonprofit just sends you an email and says like, hey, would you like to donate to us? It's like, no, I don't even know you. Leave me alone. So you have to really understand that building a relationship with these donors before asking them to give is going to be key. That's what the advantage of peer-to-peer is that people want to support the people they know. I'll give you a little example. My mom decided after many years of depression, dealing with a lot of difficult situations in her life, she decided to go to Tanzania and to volunteer for 3 months it was in an orphanage and in a center for a daycare for children with special needs. My mom's a social worker, so she had the skills required. And she decided to go for 3 months, and she decided to do a little fundraiser before because it was impossible for the organization to do international fundraising. So at first she had given herself $1,000 goal. I said, no, mom, you can do 2,000. I'm going to help you. So my mom doesn't know how to do social media. She didn't know how to post pictures on her Facebook. Okay. We're talking like she's not one of those, like she's getting better now. But I said, okay, let's make a list of who do you think in your immediate network would support you? Oh, your mother-in-law, me, your children, your old colleagues, your friends, your sister. And then we made a second column of like, and how much do you think that they would realistically be able to give? Are they more on the $25 scale or more the $100 scale? So we really made a list of all the people in our network. And I'm like, now you're going to reach out to them individually. You're not just going to post it on social media and like, let's see what happens. No, you're going to proactively reach out to these people. Are they going to say no to my 60-year-old mom who's going to Tanzania for 3 months to help children? No. Did she reach her goal? Yes. And it helped because I also did some outreach in my network. So her pool of potential prospects increased because I came in with my network, but also from the nonprofit perspective. Would they have ever gotten those donors in? No. So that is the power of peer-to-peer. The next one is email, of course. A lot of nonprofits do it. Once again, it really depends on the quality of the contacts that you have with these email subscribers. If it's just a random list of people, your conversion rate is probably going to be a bit lower, unless you have really amazing storytelling, which is very possible. But of course, as we're going down, it becomes less and less personal and more wide scale. So the conversion rate, as you see here with this little arrow, the conversion rate tends to go down the less personal it is. And but the other counter side is that the more we go up, the more personalized we make it, the more it costs money. So managing a face-to-face team in the streets where you're paying a team of 20 people to spend 7 hours outside, sometimes in Canada it was like minus 20 degrees, it was ridiculous. You're paying these people all day and they might get 1 or 2 monthly donors, which is great, that's what you want, but how much did it cost? Your costs might be, it might take a year before the monthly donations actually go towards the nonprofit. I'm not saying you don't need to do that. It's an investment that needs to be made, but it's very expensive. Of course, the less personal it is, one person can manage an email blast. And so it might take a couple hours to do the copywriting and sending it out max. So of course it's less costs. So it's really about finding the balance between, okay, it costs more, but we're getting more. And that's when you're going to have to evaluate what's worth it. So these are just some high level, these are the different strategies you can use. The socials is gaining a lot of popularity, but once again, it depends on who your donor personas are. If your donor personas are people like my mom, they will not donate on social media unless it's because I specifically, like their daughter sends them like, donate here. I'm not saying none of them will, but it's definitely a generational thing that is changing. But there are things like TikTok now is exploding. I hate TikTok personally, but it's exploding with people fundraising for themselves and for nonprofits, where just engaging in views creates, money. But of course, you'll never get the same amount of dollars that you would get from building personal relationships with these donors, but you can use socials as a way of engaging new people. And then if they make a donation, converting them into your own database, and then you can start building up a more personal relationship. So a lot of these strategies are about, you have to capture these people, but you can't just then say, okay, my job is done. Bye. You have to follow up. So how do you choose which of these strategies are going to be right for you? These are the kinds of questions that you might ask yourself. What's the return on investment? So for example, the face-to-face. I know that every monthly donor of $10 that I receive, it costs me $120, for example, on average. Is that a good enough return on investment for you? Does that make sense? The question I would ask is, do you have the capacity to steward that relationship to make sure that these donors do not just their first year to at least break even, but they actually continue for years on end? On average, they say that monthly donors are much more likely to continue for at least 3 years. But if you're not maintaining a relationship with them, if you're not sending them emails, you're not updating them, there's a much higher likelihood of attrition, that they're going to leave. So you have to think about, what's the return on investment? Fundraising events, I didn't even include it in there because fundraising events are so much things in there. Fundraising events are great for visibility, for example, and for acquisition. But if you're not continuing, these people are just coming to have fun at your event and leaving. So you have to think of, what if is the quality of the leads being generated by the different strategies? Social media, are these people that are just hopping on a trend and supporting you, but that are not going to continue? So you really have to consider, what are the different strategies and how aligned are they with your mission? If you do a golf tournament, the famous golf tournaments, are people just supporting it because they want to go play golf with their buddies? Or are they actually coming to donate to your cause? So you have to think about, if like it's bringing in lots of money, then maybe the quality is not as bad because you just need a lot of money right now. But if you're looking to build in the long term, let's say with your monthly gifts, you want to make sure that these leads and these donors are high quality. If not, the return on investment is not going to be worth it. Then you have to think about, who are your donors? So what are your donor personas? We're going to talk a little bit about that later, but is it people like Gen Z that is all over TikTok? Or is it more the older population? Is it for the arts? Is it for, there's different causes that people are more likely to be from certain generations that they support. So of course, you need to understand who's your target audience here and who's more likely to give. That's going to affect what strategies you choose. And then finally, which it should actually be one of the first ones to think of. What is your internal capacity? What can you actually do? Is organizing a freaking golf tournament is something that you actually physically can do without burning out? The face-to-face, do you have the capacity to train these people, make sure that they're doing it well? It's a lot of things that you need to consider. Is email the most accessible way? Then do email. But you have to always try to think of it as a building up towards a strategy that will fit best with your nonprofit. By the way, if there's any people that have questions, please put them in the chat as we're talking so you don't forget them. And I'll hopefully we'll have some time at the end to cover them. Okay, so we have the strategies for acquisition, but what if we're looking to identify potential donors before we actually do any of these strategies? This is where prospecting comes into play. So for example, for grants, you can't just like post something on social media and hope that a grantor is gonna say, oh, you should apply. No, you have to be proactive about it. Same thing with sponsorships, same thing with major giving. You need to start proactively approaching donors. So where do you find these potential donors? First of all, you need to look inside, not inside yourself. We're not talking about meditation here, even though I highly suggest doing that. But I mean, who do you know? Which contacts do you have? Do you have friends that work in a certain company that can open doors for you? Do you know people who know other people? Because like I said before, fundraising is very much a relational game. So before you start saying, oh, I'm going to go ask Mackenzie Scott. No, you're not. You're not. No, like you need to first know who, do you know someone that knows Mackenzie Scott? If not, then let's put that aside, that wonderful dream aside for now, and let's focus on people that you actually have contacts with. You need to be accessible. Who does your board know? This is a great way of mobilizing your board if they are not super mobilized, to making a list of, okay, who's your lawyer, who's your accountant, who's your dentist, who's your doctor, who's your this, who do you know in your family that owns a business, that is an investor, or make a list of the typical insurance companies. A lot of these companies that are more likely to give and that tend to have the capacity and want visibility. So for companies, that could be interesting. From a grant perspective, of course, if you know someone that works in a foundation that is aligned, fantastic. I feel like that's a bit of a more smaller range of people that you might know. So that's where grant databases come into play. I didn't mention any particular ones here because I'm not like a promotional, I don't sponsor any one database, and it also depends on where you are. So there's one in Canada that I would recommend is Grant Connect. It's the only one that really makes sense. But in the States, there's so many: Instrumental, Candid, Grant Station. It really depends on your budget and how much you want this grant database to do. The prices range from $200 a year to several $1,000s a year. So it really depends on how much you want them to do. The more automated the process is, then of course, the more expensive it is. But these grant databases will usually allow you to do searches based on where physically you're located, on the cause, the alignment, the process, the types of donations they award, the amounts that they award. So you can really get a list of potential prospects of, okay, I have 20 grantors that could work for me. And then you start building up relationships with them. This is something that I've done for many clients because I have access to the databases. Instead of them having to pay for the database, I do the research and I have access to it. So it's more cost efficient for nonprofits. And oftentimes you need to understand the granting strategy. So sometimes it's just easier if someone else does it. But if not, you can definitely do it yourself. You don't have to hire someone externally, but you just need to have access to these grant databases. There are also, for individuals, wealth screening tools. Sorry, I need some coffee. So wealth screening tools are more for individuals, but can also be used for companies. So once again, this so depends, and this is a very international audience. This really depends on where you are in the world. Some countries have less data privacy laws than others. The United States versus Canada, you're going to find a lot more information on individuals in the US. In Canada, because we have a lot of data privacy laws, it's a lot more difficult to find information on who has given to what organizations, unless it was published in an annual report. And then again, you have the name. I'll just use Alan Hayden, or whoever it is. You don't know if is it the right one? Is it my Aiden Highland? You don't know. So it's very difficult. But in the United States, it's like published everywhere, it seems. So it's a lot easier to track down and to say, oh, one of our donors who's giving us, 20 or $30 a month is actually giving 30K to this organization every year. Interesting. So then you can really build up your prospect list. Let's say if you want to do a major donation campaign, you can start by getting to know your donors or looking into prospects by having these well screening tools. Once again, they are a bit hefty cost sometimes. So I use personally iWave, which allows me to do Canada and the US, but it's something like over 4K a year. So it's definitely not free. You have to really make sure that the return on investment of this tool makes sense for you, that your country allows you to use that information, etc. For those that are more grassroots, Google Alerts. If you're looking into a particular prospect or a particular funder or for particular donations, you can set up a Google Alert that says, okay, whenever you can say climate change plus donation, for example, or climate change plus grant. And then it'll give you an alert once a day or weekly or whenever they pop up of what's happening. That'll allow people to, you'll get the alert straight to your email. It says like, oh, this happened recently. So this is a great way of getting news. Isaac, if you want to just either leave the question in the chat, we're going to cover it at the end just to make sure that I have time to go over everything, but I'll definitely have no problem answering your question. But if you can just type it in there, if it's really related, I might take it 2 seconds to say it, but if not, just to type it in. We'll cover it later. So there's also LinkedIn, which if you're not on LinkedIn yet, please go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great way of building these connections. So when we're talking about like, who do you know, who knows people, LinkedIn is a great way of discovering that. So if you have a list, for example, of companies that you're like, we feel these are great companies that would match as a sponsor or as a major donor, you can then ask your board, let's all go on our phones, go on LinkedIn, type in this name. Oh, I have a second connection with them, or I have a first connection with them. You'll be able to open up the doors. Little story about LinkedIn, the power of LinkedIn. One of my collaborators that works with me, she was the executive director of a nonprofit, and she was trying to get this big box store as a donor. Power of LinkedIn. She was researching all of the like top people, like C-level at the company. And she realized that the main lawyer of the company had gone to elementary school, primary school with her father. This was the connection that she used to reach out to them on LinkedIn. Hey, you went to school with my dad. Do you remember me? And he said, yes, when we were young, we were still in contact, blah, 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 blah. Sure, I don't mind opening up the door. I'm not the right person that can make the decision, but I know who is, and I can make the introduction. When you have a warm introduction from inside the company, it's much more likely to bear fruit because companies want to support their employees' causes because it creates that whole team building, internal support, and it makes it easier for them to make those decisions about who to support. So LinkedIn, these are free tools that anyone can use. There's also for grants and stuff, let's say in Canada, we have the CRA, so Canada Revenue Agency, where all the foundations are legally obliged to put who they've given money to. So you can always look through those kinds of national databases to see who has given. Once again, every country is different, so you'd have to look into what of the information is publicly available and what is not for your country. But there are ways of finding this information for free. It's just usually takes more time, whereas on a database, it'll pop it up automatically. So these are the different ways of where you can find information when you're looking for new donors, especially the bigger ones. This is not to find $20 donations, this is really to find the couple thousands of dollars minimally. Okay. So Humane Society. I'm very excited, Carla, to talk about that. I'll answer later. Okay, so we've just done all this work into getting people in. Think about it as dating, okay? You just did an amazing first date with someone. Are you gonna ghost them? I hope not. I mean, it's not proper dating etiquette. But in the sense of, if you want to get a second date, if you want to get a second donation, you need to keep up the conversation, guys. We need to keep it rolling so that people feel like there's a relationship happening. I don't mean like obviously going on dates with your donors, but what I'm saying is you still have to build up the rapport with your donors. And this is where the importance of stewardship comes in. So just a quick data point that is useful: retention. So it costs between 5 and 20 times less than acquisition. So getting that second donation, getting that second date is a lot less work than getting the first one. You have to go through a lot less people because you've already built a relationship with them. So if you're thinking about, okay, we have 100 donors, it's not a lot, those are the ones that you should focus on first before starting to reach out to new people. So with that in mind, we need to organize, who do we have? And this is where these are the certain questions of how are we organizing? How do we know who's in our organization? So do you have a CRM? Please say yes, because I hope you have something to manage your donor database. Even if it's a damn spreadsheet, okay, guys, you need something to be keeping this information together. But there are a much more hefty CRMs that are still very affordable that will allow you to have much more information and to collect proper information and data on your donors so that you can move forward with more confidence. So what kind of information are you collecting on your donors? So of course, this could be obviously their name, their address, their contact information, but you might even go a step further. So I'll give you an example. When I was working for the Society of Protection of Animals Canada, so I was working for an animal rights organization, and we were doing those face-to-face conversations with people. And one of the questions that we asked is, what's the name of your pet? And what pet do you have? This was, first of all, a great conversation starter. Everyone loves talking about their pets, but it also made it so that when I followed up and I called people and I said, hey, how you doing? How's Oreo doing? They're like, oh my God, you know Oreo. And it's like, yes, of course, we write this kind of information down. So not only did it build rapport, but it also built up confidence that, yes, this person did meet me in the street because they know the name of my animal. Who else would know the name of my pet? So it builds confidence, it allows for a conversation starter, and it just builds this kind of connection. Your nonprofit might not care about the name of their pets, but they might care about something else, such as, why are they supporting it? Is it more the advocacy aspect, the educational aspect? You might want to start collecting information on their interests. Other people will ask, do they have kids or not? And this doesn't have to be in a formal way. You can, when you have conversations with people, just write all of this information down in their donor profile. You want to be keeping as much information, of course, that not super crazy sensitive information, but things that will allow you to build a relationship with these people. But if there's any official ones, like the name of their pets, you might have the dog list, the cat list, that they might receive specific communications based on their interests or based on their certain situation. Second, the third one is, how often do you clean up your data? When I say that, it could be very manual, just making sure that the information makes sense. Sometimes it's just like capitalization, that the first name and last name haven't been inversed. You have to make sure to have your information as clean as possible, because it's so weird when people say, hello, McDonald, or hello, Lacefield, and I'm like, wait, my name is Catherine. That's kind of weird, so there's the automation process that if your data is not as clean, it can create some problems with the automation, which automation is going to be very helpful for you to help with a lot of these campaigns. So making sure you have a process to clean up your data, but also that you have some form of data management policy. This really doesn't have to be, it sounds super fancy, but what I mean is that how are things entered in the database? For the postal code, are you capitalizing the letters and the numbers? Try to make it so that all of your stuff look the same and are written properly. Because whenever someone else is going to come in and enter information, you want to make sure that's written properly. Like, for example, if the province, are we just doing, or the state, are we just doing the initials, or are we writing the state out completely? Is it capitalized? Is it this? These are just so that you have a clean data set that is much less likely to have mistakes. Sometimes you get typos in it. So just having someone or some way of cleaning up your data is going to be very helpful moving forward. I'm talking too fast. Okay, segmentation criteria. So you have a data set. You have hopefully thousands of donors. Are you going to be able to reach out to them each individually? Unless you have a team of 500 people, maybe not. So you need to be able to segment and to prioritize who are you going to be able to steward at a higher level. Of course, we would love to be able to do them to support them all, but you're going to have different strategies based on where they are in this donor pyramid, because there's only so much you can do in a day. So what are the kinds of criteria you're going to use? Number one, you might want to segment around the amount of the donation. So this might be, what's their average gift or their average annual gift? What is their maximum gift or their minimal gift? what is their lifetime value? So these different criteria around amount allow for different forms of segmentation. The lifetime is going to focus on, you want the loyal donors. So these are maybe the ones that you're going to be curating towards, for example, a legacy gift. So the ones that have given the most over their lifetime, then those are going to be the ones that are interesting. You might want to also be able to like congratulate them at the 5K mark. Hey, you've given us 5K so far. That's amazing. Kind of like when you're doing a marathon where those different milestones of kilometers will really encourage people to like see you in the next 5K or whatever it may be, but it could allows you to do some different forms of stewardship. The maximum and minimum allow you to also be able to establish, okay, if everyone in this list gave their maximum, we have a potential of this much money that could come in. But we can also on the other side say, well, if they only give their minimum, we have this. So it gives you a range to be able to project into the future. What are you likely to have? I have clients sometimes are like, yeah, we want to raise $1 million next year. I'm like, okay. And based on what? And they're like, oh, that's what we would like to have. I'm like, that's amazing, fantastic, but that's maybe not realistic. What are you basing yourself on? So if you have annually 600K coming in and suddenly you want $1 million, it's like, okay, but okay, if everyone gave their maximum, we'd only get 900,000. So then if we want to reach $1 million, we know that we're going to have to go into a great acquisition phase to get new people in, because our current donors, we would not be able to get that. And even then, realistically, is everyone going to give their maximum? So these are where having this information is very helpful. You might want to also segment based on the frequency. Are they one-time giving? Are they monthly giving? Have they given many times throughout their lifetime? And then the last one is recency, or the date of their last donation. Someone that has given in the last year or in the last 2 years is much more likely to give than someone that gave 10 years ago. Same thing with the dating. If you haven't seen the person in 10 years and suddenly say, hey, you want to go out for coffee? They're going to say, who the hell are you? Like, what's going on? So you have to make sure that like the less time that passes between that there's contact, the more likely they are to give. So what is the point of doing this? I do a little matrix, by the way, where I give a point system to the different categories. So for example, in the amount, over $1,000 gets 3 points. Between 500 and 1,000 gets 2 points, and under 500 gets 1. That way I can really have a prioritization of the ones that get 9 points, so that they have the 3 points for each category. They've given the last year, they've given more than 3 times, and they've given over 1,000. They're going to be my 9 pointers. There might only be 15 or 20 of them, but those are going to be the ones that I'm going to call personally. I'm going to invite for a coffee chat. I'm going to maybe send a little something by mail that's handwritten. So these are the ones that you're going to be able to segment out and really build relationships to move them up in the pyramid. So these are the different ways you can segment your database. So once you have these segments, what do we do now? So where else can you get some data? So you might want to not just look at the numbers. You might want to look at like where they live, not like their physical, like generally, you might not saying go say hi, what's up at their house, but just like understanding what area do they live in. So you can create a donor map of like, where are our hotspots of where people are donating to us. You might want to know their average income. You might want to know what their education level is. Are they from diversity? Like, what's their background? Do they have children? These are the kinds of information that might help you build up better donor personas. I mentioned these before. Donor personas are just general profiles that represent your donors. You might have several. I'll give a little quick example of one. I worked for it was a climate change environmental legal defense group in Canada. And we established that based on their internal data, they had certain profiles, but there was no young people. Like there was no people under 25. And if we looked at, we have a good provincial data on who's giving. For who's giving to environment, the younger generation was at the top of the list. So we were realizing that we were missing out on a persona because we were somehow not reaching out to them in a certain way. Maybe they weren't as active on socials. Maybe they weren't doing some kinds of reaching out that would be accessible to the younger generation. This is where building up your donor personas can be very helpful, but then also figuring out who is absent. So who is not on your list that, according to general reports, should be. The donor personas, where you're getting this information. If you don't have it already in your database, you might do some surveys. You can send out a little survey with a couple questions. I've had people submit like how much money they make in a year, what their education level is, why are they interested. People will give this information if it's anonymous, of course, just to give you an idea of what your database looks like. We had given a little like $50, you get like a $50 gift card to something. It was really just like, by participating, you get something to encourage and incentivize people to participate. The question of, does this make sense, is, does what you're looking at make sense to what you're seeing in real life? Or is this what you want? Is this average donation, oh, that's kind of low, like how come? Or, oh, wow, I didn't realize that if everyone gave a maximum of this much, like I'd be able to reach this much. Maybe I'm leaving money on the table. So there's all of this. By taking the time to analyze your data and take a breath, which I know not many nonprofits don't have time to do, you can really establish a stronger strategy to make your nonprofit stronger as well. So these are some different stewardship strategies. So you can obviously send out emails. These can be more or less personalized depending on where they are on the segmentation. You might want to send physical mail. I'm not talking about like the tons of stickers, and also I love stickers. Please send me stickers. But you can, for certain segments, personalize them by making it handwritten. There's companies that will actually make handwritten, but they're actually robot written, but it looks like they're handwritten. So you can do it mass if you don't have a big internal capacity. It's a bit more expensive than mail, but you don't have to deal with the hassle of sending them out. Social media mentions, maybe for foundations or for companies, having that visibility is maybe important to them. Phone calls, public visibility. So this could be having the typical name on the building. These kinds of things are useful, but one of the things that I feel people don't use is sharing their story. Take the time to get to know them. Hey, I'd love to invite you to a quick coffee chat to say, why are you donating to us? Like, we'd love to hear, why did you choose us as your legacy gift, for example? And then with their consent, sharing that story. It's so much more personal, and it can also inspire other people to support you. So these are just some higher level strategies of choosing the strategies that work for you. So remember, when you're doing stewardship, what is aligned with your values? If you're an environmental organization, sending a whole bunch of stuff by mail is maybe not aligned with your mission. I've had animal shelters do barbecues where people criticize them because they were doing meat when they were an animal organization. So like, just keep in mind what is aligned with your mission and your values before doing these types of activities. What is your capacity? Don't overdo it for yourself. If you are alone doing these things, maybe just do phone calls or send a mass email to your top 20 and say, hey, I'd love to have a 15-minute chat, and use something like Calendly that can automate the process of booking it with them. And you can still have those one-on-one times, but on their own time. And then establishing, what are you going to do for each segment? Okay, my top donors are going to get a phone call. They're going to get coffee chats. They're going to get this. But then for people that are on the priority 4, the ones that, let's say, have not given a lot, just sending it out a thank you email is perfectly okay. So you have to really establish, what are you going to do for each of your segments? And then think about, how much money can I actually invest in stewardship? So for example, for my clients, the gift that I think about for Christmas obviously depends on how big the contract was. If I just did a $500 training, I'm not going to necessarily do the same thing as if I got a $20,000 full development plan contract. You have to establish these things to make so that it makes sense. And then, of course, you have to listen to your donors. If they're saying, we really don't want to receive phone calls anymore, note it on their profile and don't call them again. Always respect what your donors want as well. So the final thing that and this is where I'm gonna ask Jeremy to maybe come in. One of the things I think is very helpful with a lot of these campaigns is getting external data, because a lot of nonprofits that I've known, they don't have the internal capacity to be able to analyze fully of like, okay, what does each of my segments want? So, and also it depends on where in the world you are. So like I was mentioning before, in Quebec, we have these amazing reports that will say, oh, this generation is much more likely to donate this way. But the rest of Canada doesn't have those kinds of statistics. So having those regional, provincial, or even national reports is not accessible to everyone. There are some international or bigger institutions like Wings, Alliance Magazine, but they don't have necessarily the individual data that you're looking for. So while these are great sources of information, having really okay, but what about my organization for my cause? Who is most likely to give to me? So this is where I was really excited when Jeremy, we first talked. I don't even remember how long ago it was, like a couple months ago when we talked about this, where there is solutions being developed so that even small nonprofits that don't have a huge data set will be able to benefit from this information. So I'd just like to take a couple minutes for Jeremy. Maybe if you can present a bit what Pravi is doing, just so that people can understand the advantages of that for fundraising in the context of what we just covered today.
Thanks so much, Catherine. That was genuinely really excellent. Oh, and also I just love your presentation style as well. I'll be sure to send you some stickers through the mail. But yeah, no, so like just excellent presentation and so relevant to what we're building at Pravi. So we agree with you that the data's out there, but the problem is particularly for the smaller and medium-sized charities, that actually bringing it all together, customizing it for the type of nonprofit you are, whether it's your cause or your size or your constituents, the people who want to give to you, is really difficult. Fortunately, there are solutions being built. So with the power of kind of AI or machine learning, we can now ingest just enormous amounts of data from tax reports from various nonprofits across the world. We can get credit card, debit card transaction data. We can get that census data that you've talked about. We can get economic indicators, and we can feed that to our models and actually get really actionable, crunchy, specific insights to your nonprofit. So that's the concept. And what we're currently working on is making it as simple to use as possible, because we're really interested in democratizing this data and making it available to as many people as we can. So to that end, you're all invited to the waitlist. So we'll send you an email after this with a recording of this like excellent presentation and also a little demo video of what we're working on and some discount codes as well. But yeah, so what we're working on is exactly what Catherine is talking about, which is the data's out there. How do you get it? And how do you actually turn that into the social impact that you're all looking to drive?
Yeah, because so what I find really interesting is that we have to understand this the nonprofit sector, that the for-profit sector has been benefiting from these big data sets for years, and that's why they're kicking ass on the like market. It's because they're leveraging the data they have to know who is buying this similar product. Nonprofits have not been benefiting. Well, some of them, maybe the bigger ones, have been using a lot of these things for years, but small, medium nonprofits, Jesus, they don't even have CRMs most of the time. Let's be honest. So like, how can they manage and leverage this data to really say, okay, who is most likely to give to my organization? Maybe I'm not tapping into the right persona. And even just like analyzing the data that you have, it might not be a big enough data set. So I think what was amazing when I first heard about this was that by many nonprofits kind of putting their data together and being anonymized, it allows us to have a much bigger data set. And for me, that's all about the collaboration over competition. By nonprofits supporting each other, and let's work together to maximize the efficiency of all of our causes. I really think that is really the way we need to go as a nonprofit sector.
Absolutely. I think we can all help each other together. I mean, the dollars are out there to do so much good for the world. And our kind of core belief in what we're building is that if someone is passionate, or if I suppose it's you, if you're on the line and you're passionate enough to show up, to actually get your organization going and to be delivering that good out there, we fundamentally believe that that means that there must be people at least passionate enough to be giving to you on a regular monthly basis, and hopefully moving up through that pyramid that Catherine showed us. So that's exactly what we're trying to unlock for everybody. Let's check if we've got any questions on the line.
Yeah, feel free. either type it in, or honestly, since we have the capacity to it, if people want to just raise their hand and ask vocally, that's possible as well. I'm just going to pop in for those who want to continue being in contact. I'm on LinkedIn. You can always connect with me there if you're not already. I share a lot of this kind of information already on social media. And of course, we will be in contact because I'll have your email now. So you'll be automatically invited to my newsletter, which I share a lot of these kinds of information. And I do webinars like this every now and then. But yeah, please, if you guys have any questions about anything, I know we covered a lot today. I try to make these sessions really jam-packed with content and with useful information. So if anyone has any questions, just you can raise your hand or type it in the chat.
And I'm on Catherine's list. I get her email and I follow her on LinkedIn, and I can endorse what she's saying there. You'll get these excellent nuggets. Equally follow myself or Robin, and if there's anything you would like to know as it occurs to you into the future, just reach out to any of us. But yeah, I hope you've all really enjoyed today's session. Again, thank you so much, Catherine. I found it really, really enlightening, and I trust that everyone else on the line did as well.
Hello.
Yes, hi, Isaac. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I have learned a lot, even though I joined late for some time. And my concern here is if I want to secure research funding or research grants, would you mind to share with me how to write or a template, the best template for me to write my research grant funding formats or templates? Thank you.
So for creating what I would usually call like a letter of interest for grants, is that you can create a template, but you also have to understand that the best chances of you of getting that grant is to personalize it to what the grantor is looking for. So what I often tell people is, instead of talking about all the amazing work you do, like, yes, you have to include that, but also show how by the grantor partnering with you, because I see it as a partnership. If they're funding you, but they have their own charitable objectives. A lot of people don't, like, they kind of forget that, especially if they're a philanthropic grantor or a philanthropic foundation, they are registered as a charity as well. Like, they have their own charitable objectives that they need to reach to be a charity. So making sure that you say, okay, by partnering with us, we're achieving this goal that you have of, let's say, educating girls in this part of the world. I'm just inventing cause right now. But by saying, by working together and by funding our project, you will be allowing us to help you achieve this particular mission that you have. You're creating that connection that's not just like, well, I do all of this work and you should support me and give me money. Like, unfortunately, even if you do amazing work, by building that connection of by partnering, we are going to be stronger together, and you need to work with me because I'm the only one that does it in this region. So trying to personalize it as much as possible. And if not, try to focus on stories of impact. Numbers are great and all, but they don't move people. Logic does not inspire people to give. If you have a great story, even if it's just a couple lines of something, like a story of impact, that is much more likely to change someone's opinion. Like, for example, this little girl, she was finally able to, finish school and get out of this situation, and I ended up at this university, whatever. But telling a concrete story is much more likely to move people. Because you have to understand, a lot of these funders receive hundreds of applications. So how can you get your foot in the door is by being more personal. My second advice that I would give for anyone looking for grants is, try to contact the funder before submitting your application. The number of times where I've curated meetups between a funder and my client, and we've learned so much from that conversation. There are sometimes grant managers that literally their job is to help you apply to their grants. So try to have a meeting with them, send them an email. I have these questions about your application. What does it look like? And then I've even had a little personal example where this client was an environmental education group, and we had two projects that were very different, but that both fit with the charitable foundation's objectives. One of them was for youth, and it was in schools, and it was for children with language development problems. And the other one was I have a French word in my head right now, but greenhouse gas emission education project for families. So we had these two projects. We were sure they were going to want the child one, but we used the like, we don't know which one to apply to kind of start a conversation with them. And they actually said, actually, the greenhouse gas project is much more interesting to us because it's one of our pillars, and we have a lot less people applying with that project in mind, that kind of project in mind. So we highly suggest and encourage you to apply with this project, which I wouldn't have been able to know in advance, right? So it's really about reaching out to them proactively to get the information you want. I hope that answers your question, Isaac.
And one more, please. What I'm asking is the basic format. If at all you mind to share with me the basic format.
It really depends. It really depends. There's not a basic format.
The basic format, madam. Just the basic format, at least for me to instead of from scratch, at least if I have a basic, I can grow from there.
Honestly, go ahead.
So sorry, Catherine. I think Isaac, it might be worth describing what kind of grant you're applying for to chat, like a tool like ChatGPT, and then it will be able to generate like a custom template for you in each instance.
Yeah, definitely. ChatGPT can be very helpful, especially if you can pop in the grant structure. Like you can just copy paste the text. So like, I'm applying to this grant, boop, pop it in. And this is a description of my nonprofit, boop, pop it in and say, write me a template of this many words, depends on what they're asking for, which covers our mission statement, our vision statement, and this story. And then it'll give you a template that you can start up. I honestly use ChatGPT a lot just to create a basic structure, and then I personalize it to each. But of course, things that you need to include is a short history of your organization, when you were founded, what your mission is, your vision, so your long-term vision of what you would see as like, once we reach this point, we did our work, our job is done. This is the vision that we have for the future. And of course, a description of your programs that are related to the grant you're applying for. Is there any?
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to chat. Like, it's just easier if it's like one-on-one, maybe it might be easier. Is there anyone else that has any final questions or comments, or if not?
I think that might be it from the chat, Catherine. Yeah. But again, I would encourage everyone to follow along with Catherine on LinkedIn. Her newsletter is full of like actionable, really like insightful commentary. So get along with that. And again, finally, thank you very much for sharing with this, Catherine. I've personally found it hugely valuable. I hope everyone else has. We will send through the recording shortly after this session. So thank you again, Catherine. And have a wonderful afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Oh,
thanks, everybody.
I don't know if we have a last question before we top of the hour.
I think there might just be.
Excuse me, please, Catherine. Would you mind to share the presentation? Some of us, videos watching, we prefer sometimes the readings. Yeah, thank you.
It will be shared by email. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, PowerPoint. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Christian, if you have a question, you can maybe ask me on LinkedIn since the time is up.
Yes.